Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everybody, welcome to my guide for Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh. Ugh. Last time we touched on Umoja, the most nerfed god in history. Well, here's the second most nerfed god in history. Gilgamesh is a basic attack based, heavy crowd control, all-in style character who's a rock solid jungler and an okay solo laner. His builds reflect this, both in the jungle and solo role. Jungle tips over to being a bit more damaging while solo tips over to being more defensive, with both still being a bit tankier than the assassin counterparts when it comes to basic attack based characters. Relics wise, it's most often Blink Beads, as he lacks any inherent CC immunity in his kit and, like most assassin style characters, loves having Blink. Beads can be substituted out for a more aggressive relic, but Beads has both offensive and defensive capabilities too, so Let's get into Gilgamesh's passive. This is a fun one. Once Gilgamesh hits level 5, a marker is placed on the map, visible on the minimap. This mark is placed randomly, but generally seems to follow wherever Gilgamesh was when he hit level 5. If Gilgamesh simply walks over this marker, he is given a random tier 1 item, or 500 gold if all of his item slots are full. Then at level 10, Gilgamesh gains another quest. This time, Gilgamesh must kill or get an assist on 3 enemy gods within the span of 30 seconds total, shown here in the passive bar. If and when Gilgamesh completes this, he again gets a random tier 1 item or 500 gold if all the item slots are taken up. So for the first part of the passive, you go for the marker when the coast is clear and there's minimal or no farm on the map for your role. And for the second part of the passive, it kinda just happens during teamfights and is more or less out of your hands. Gilgamesh is aggressive as hell anyway, so if you're playing him well, you'll get the passive without even realizing it. So yeah, not a lot of tips. It's a funky passive, but not an overly complicated one. I suppose what you should do with the items once it gives it to you is the talking point. Builds, especially on bruiser basic attack assassins like Gilgamesh, run far and wide. I'd say build the tier 1 into an appropriate item unless it's something completely outlandish like a crit item. Even then, it's good to hold on to that tier 1 item for as long as you can for the stats. Then, if selling it gets you enough gold to finish an item, go for it. Now for Gilgamesh's first ability. Gilgamesh damages and slows in an area around him, and after this AoE slam, whether or not it hit anything, Gilgamesh gains amplified basic attacks based on his max HP for 3 seconds, this duration being extended by successful basic attacks on enemies for up to a total of 9 seconds. So if all the basic attacks land, this essentially waits him out until another use of his first ability. Again, very straightforward. It encourages Gilgamesh's in-your-face approach and is great follow-up to any of his movement or crowd control options. You can still happily use this ability in the neutral though. Unlike most abilities of this type, you still get a nice chunk of damage as well as CC just for activating it. So simply walking in range, smacking it down, basicking once or twice while the slow is active is perfectly fine for it having such a low cooldown. Speaking of those crowd control options, let's get to them with Gilgamesh's signature move, his second ability. Gilgamesh winds up a massive kick, but this AoE only shows you the size of the kick. Gilgamesh will kick the enemy that is nearest to him and end the AoE. He damages this enemy and sends them flying via a knockup. If the damaged enemy collides with a minion, they take damage. If the damaged enemy collides with a wall or a god, however, they take the same damage in addition to some bonus damage, as well as being stunned for 1.2 seconds. And the god they landed on will be stunned as well if they hit a god. Okay, that is a lot. Let's start small with the actual casting of this ability. Firstly, Gilgamesh actually does dash forward a small amount after the damaging portion of the kick ends, whether or not it hit anything. So when you're being chased down with no chance of survival, just kicking out is an alright way to gain some extra distance. But alright, how about when you're actually trying to hit the thing? Well, this may strike you as Gilgamesh's clear option in the solo lane, and at one time it was, but the damage is so minimal now that it's really not worth it. Gilgamesh typically relies on his first ability on the wave, and then basic attacking it down from there, holding onto the kick instead as a trade tool. Speaking of flinging minions around though, it's not only hilarious, but sounds like a great option to use against gods since you can do it at quite a good distance. But this isn't always the best option. If someone's just never walking up to you, sure, go for it. But it should immediately become clear to you that even if you fully master the dropkick, the constantly shifting minions changing the trajectory of themselves if they were to be dropkicked makes this a suboptimal use of the ability if they're any appreciable distance away. Close up, it's just fine though. Again, it's still an option, but it shouldn't be your main option. Typically, Gilgamesh gets right up in people's faces and shunts them directly into walls. Really, all you need to get down is how hard you can flick this ability to ensure it lands. Also, sometimes using your movement while casting the ability to reposition yourself as you fire the dropkick. Of course, if a Gilgamesh is running at you, this is what he's trying to do, and everybody's gonna know that. So that's where you can use Blink or slow people down with your first ability to ensure that it'll hit. It's a funky ability, and it'll take some time to get used to. But if I had a suggestion, use it all the time you're in range to. Now, don't just go punting people away, of course. That's an awful use of the ability, outside of peeling for your team. What I'm saying is that if you're in range to use the dropkick, try to use it and get a stun off to start a combo. The more times you try, the more opportunities you have to better understand how to time and move your camera during the kick. This ability is obviously super loaded, so landing it is key to winning trains as Gilgamesh. But if you end up missing it, don't worry, that's where Gilgamesh's third ability comes in. Gilgamesh leaps and lands in a huge AoE, this AoE acting as a beacon for Gilgamesh and his allies. Gilgamesh and all allies inside the AoE gain half movement speed as well as lifesteal based on Gilgamesh's protections. while Gilgamesh and allies walking towards the AoE will gain the full movement speed effect but will not gain lifesteal. A super simple ability with a whole lot of text. When you use it defensively, you get a bit of move speed, and if you need to go back towards where you landed, if say the fight you ran from turned into one in your team's favor, you have the move speed to get back to it. Pretty much the same idea as if you're using it aggressively. Let's be real, you're not missing this ability. So you get a nice bit of damage mixed with some move speed and lifesteal, which are perfect for running down opponents and of course getting in range for a good dropkick. Other than the lifesteal, there isn't too much to play around here. Just stay in the circle for the lifesteal if and when you need it, but most times you're just going to leave the beacon area behind as soon as you land so you can be more aggressive. Be aggressive with what? His ultimate, of course. Gilgamesh summons a massive circle AoE, which damages and slows upon its deployment and begins dealing damage every half second to all enemies inside of it. If an enemy walks out of the AoE, they are massively slowed as well. You're going to want to keep enemies inside the AoE if you can though, since after 6 seconds once the ultimate completes, the AoE does a final burst of damage and roots all enemies. So absolutely nasty AoE damage and control, but how do you keep enemies inside the AoE for the whole thing? Well, you see, when Gilgamesh damages an enemy god who is within the AoE, they are bounced back to the center. That's not all though. Gods who are dropkicked into the wall of the AoE are also bounced in a similar fashion, so you can totally pinball people around in the sand. It's pretty annoying. Needless to say though, all it's going to take for someone to get out of the sand is just dashing or leaping away. So you'll need to use the typical assassin style of gameplay of engaging and burning those movement abilities first, and then following up with this ability. Or wait for your support or soul laner to engage first and burn those movement abilities, then you come in and swoop them up back with the ultimate. Don't forget about the huge slow when it comes to someone's escape from the AoE either though. It makes anyone who's run out of the AoE incredibly easy to catch back up to. That said, you of course want to just pinball squishies around the ultimate all day if you can. If you drop this on a squishy target, they are all yours. Even if Gilgamesh is a bit behind, it's almost impossible to beat a Gilgamesh who gets their entire ultimate on you. Despite the absurd lockdown, the ability is still great for a multitude of other things. Just dropping it on a low health target to secure a kill, dropping it on your own team when the enemy team engages on you, putting it behind you while escaping, its silly huge size as well as the slow just makes it an all around great tool. This is reflected in the ability's cooldown though. At 110 seconds, it's easily one of the longest in the game, and as I'm sure you can tell, with good reason. But that doesn't mean you hold it back. In Gilgamesh's case, you want to use every single chance you can if it means getting a kill. But it's pretty clear that's more of a balancing tool for Gilgamesh, having to fight without this insane ultimate for long stretches of the match. It just means that it's something that you as the Gilgamesh player really need to be aware of and play around. Here's a few combos with Gilgamesh. In terms of ability leveling, it's up in the air for the most part. Here's OI level, 1 at level 1, 2 at level 2, 3 at level 3. The consternation comes from whether maxing the 1 or the 2 is superior. While I personally find maxing the 1 over the 2 is best, maxing the 2 is still totally fine. The big reason I level the 1 is simply because it reduces the cooldown of the first ability. Using your first ability twice is much better than having a stronger dropkick, which is going to have the same level of CC no matter what level it is. And some pro players put 1 level into the ult and then just leave it. This is for the same reason that the 2 isn't prioritized. The idea that while having the damage is nice, it still has the same amount of CC no matter what level, so you might as well just focus your non-ultimate damage, especially considering that again, this ability is going to be on cooldown for the majority of the match. Again, if you like leveling the ult, go off, it'll feel fine. Just don't be afraid to give the other leveling methods a go too. Gilgamesh has been a problem since his release. His damage has finally come back to earth though, and his ultimate has the cooldown such a teamfight destroying ultimate should. But he is still a complete menace for any squishy target and tanks that have a hard time locking him down, thanks to that peel with his ultimate, essentially allowing him to peel for himself while killing squishies. This doesn't mean that he's exclusively a squishy killer. While he may not be able to tango with guardians, he can still easily mix it up with strong bruiser warriors. Alright, so what's his weakness? Well, as I'm sure you can guess, he's really bad into cripples, and he lacks any inherent CC immunity, so once he's behind, it's pretty hard to get back up. But the latter, of course, can be rectified with just a few item adjustments in his build, making him tankier or just going straight for a Magi's. Gilgamesh's biggest weaknesses really is the player, and I'm including myself in that. I'm not great at him. If you can't master the dropkick, or if you can't find the perfect moment to go for that all-out combo with your ultimate on a squishy at the exact right time in the teamfight, you're really going to struggle with him. As I mentioned though, outside of those 2 abilities, Gilgamesh is dead easy. And really, get the dropkick down and you'll be flying. Gilgamesh being nerfed 20 times, or even more at this point, and still being a strong pick this entire time, should indicate to you that you'll be getting your money's worth for how much time you put into him. Well, not money's worth, but that's all I have on Gilgamesh for now. Thanks for watching.